My name is Charlotte, but we are actually here to be chatting with Natalie Kyriacou. Now, you have so many titles. Natalie has an OAM. She's a tech founder. She's an advocate, an environmentalist. Some would say influencer even. She's on the board of a few charities as well, and a fierce campaigner for nature, and now author as well. Now, you've just released your first book, Nature's Last Dance, Tales of Wonder in an Age of Extinction, and it is incredible. Now, it's been named Guardian Book of the Month. It's been named Book of the Month by the Nile. It's a bestseller. You've had endorsements from incredible people across the writing and literature world, but as well as the environmental world. Bob Brown has endorsed it. The late and magnificent Jane Goodall, which maybe that's still under wraps. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said anything. As well as Peter Fitzsimons, you know, and he loves a good book. Now, why did you write this book?
Thank you for coming along, everyone. I'm Nat. I wrote this book because, well, for a few reasons. I can see people checking out, feeling really overwhelmed by environmental crisis, feeling like they can't do anything to stop it, feeling like it's not worth it to try to stop it, or people that perhaps aren't equipped with the right information, or they're being given misinformation. And so I wanted to write a book that wasn't a traditional nature book, that was the sort of book that anybody could pick up, that would be accessible, that would make people feel and think and laugh and cry and ultimately fall in love with nature. And I wanted it to be the sort of book that has a story in there for anybody, regardless of your background, your upbringing, your context. So this was my efforts to try to get more people to fall in love with nature and to act to protect it.
You actually you say that this isn't a nature book, and you took quite an unconventional approach to that. Why was it important to include humour and include like stories that you may not necessarily associate with a nature book? Why was that important to you?
I'm a little bit of an optimist, and I think I wrote this book, and I know what the book industry is like, and not many people are buying non-fiction books, but I still in my heart think maybe this book can change the world, maybe it can do some good for the world. And so I know that often as environmentalists or people that care for the environment, we talk in our own bubbles. We talk to people that might think like us, and I wanted to write a book that, yes, you would all enjoy, but also that others who think differently to me would enjoy. And I wanted to target people that wouldn't traditionally pick up a nature book. I wanted to show them that this nature book can make them laugh out loud and can make them cry or can make them think really deeply about things. And also I wanted to show them these weird links that nature actually isn't just about trees and birds and bees, but it is so much more than that. It is about our political systems, our economic systems, the strange histories of why wristwatches are associated with fossil fuels. And so I'm making these strange links. It was trying to get as many people as possible to read this book and care about nature.
It is one of those books, like you do find yourself, and it's quite a heavy topic. I mean, even the title, Nature's Last Dance, like we are in this age of extinction. But there are times when you laugh out loud, and there are times when you even blush. And in this book, you describe the bonobo as a feminist icon, and I'd love to understand for the audience who has yet to read and relish this book, why is the bonobo a feminist icon, Nat?
So we weren't sure whether to start with this story, but we're just going to go all in and tell this wildly inappropriate story, but it's for science.
I feel like some may have read it already. Yes, wonderful.
So the bonobo is a great ape, and it bears a remarkable resemblance to a chimpanzee. but they're a little bit different from chimps. So chimps are really violent, beautifully violent, but they rip each other to shreds. Bonobo societies are less violent. They have more egalitarian societies. So chimp societies are male dominant, bonobos are not. And the peace of bonobo societies is due to the fact that female bonobos rub their clitorises together as a form of friendship and social bonding. And that allows them to overthrow the patriarchy if the men show too much violence.
That's all it takes.
And, yeah.
Let's do it.
And this is really interesting. So powerful is this behaviour to the species that the bonobo females have now evolved giant clitorises that waggle as they walk, because it is so, the female friendships and the female bonding is so beneficial to their species. And what's happened now is, the reason this came about is because female scientists have started realising, and we've been talking more and more about how Charles Darwin, for all of his incredible contributions, he didn't think much of women. He likened the female of a species to wives. He said women were less and inferior to men, and he failed to study the female of many species. So our understanding of the world today, which is largely shaped by Charles Darwin, is shaped by our understanding of male species. And, you know, Darwin was shaped by Victorian era bias, but now it's up to us to reshape that. And so there's these female scientists, heroes, if you will, who have started looking at the genitalia of female species to unlock secrets of evolution and teach us more about the greater diversity of behaviour there is across the wild world. And so there's this really funny study about the link between bonobos, hyena clitorises, and Hillary Clinton and women's leadership. And so what they're doing is they're looking into these female behaviours, all of these scientists, and they're saying, oh, we have a really limited understanding of men and women and of what leadership means and what humanity means. And maybe we can look at species like the whale and the females of the species and say, oh, what's really beneficial for their species is collaboration and knowledge sharing, and aging matriarchs are really important for passing on wisdom to others. We can look at species like the hyena and say, oh, okay, so women can also be dominant, or it's okay for men to be more emotional. And so it's showing us this wider diversity of behaviours across the animal kingdom, and maybe that will open our eyes to the great diversity we have here and recognising the unique talents of individual humans. And so that is why I like to talk about the clitoris of the bonobo.
And we've come around. I see a lot of heads nodding while we're talking about those leadership qualities like collaboration. And I can't help but think, you know, right now, global leaders are meeting in Brazil to talk about, you know, important climate policies. And gosh, if there was just a few more women rubbing... No, we don't need to be... But if there was a few more women, can you imagine the outcomes would be so much better for all of us? And it's in this book, there's so many incredible linkages you make, Nat, around, like, for example, hippos and drug lords. You make examples of pandas and geopolitical risks. But you also talk about the linkages between a military war on emus, yes, and survival of the fittest, and then you also have a way to link that to Hitler. That's a long bow. Can you talk us through this?
So in 1932, emus in Western Australia were ravaging farmlands. So the Australian government took the drastic and unprecedented step of declaring war against the emu. So the military was deployed, and embarrassingly, Australia lost the war twice. I quoted parliamentary records. Essentially, the human army was no match for the emu. Apparently, the quote was, they can face machine guns with the invulnerability of tanks. And so the Australian government was quite humiliated by this. And so I use this quite hilarious story to describe survival of the fittest and why the emu survived or won the war. And it's essentially, they employed a range of unique traits, I guess, where they were able to navigate, well, they were better adapted to the terrain, but also they had better skills where they would, if you can imagine a child trying to sort of catch confetti in the wind, that was what it was like when the military tries to catch emus, because they gather together and then they disperse quickly, and the army just could not keep up with them. And so that was how I described survival of the fittest, and maybe how Australia wasn't so fit. But then I go on to talk about survival of the fittest and how it has evolved. So Charles Darwin brought the concept of survival of the fittest into sort of popular thought. But it came to evolve and morph into something more sinister. And I think that the way that we think of survival of the fittest today is grounded in some real supremacist sort of thinking. So as many of us might know, survival of the fittest sort of came to morph into eugenics, and it said that, you know, people mistook survival of the fittest for saying, okay, there is a particular race or a particular sex is more supreme than others, and that's not what it means at all. Being fit meant you were a good puzzle piece. You fit well in your sort of ecosystem. Not you can physically lift really big weights and, you know, get in a bar fight. That's not what survival of the fittest is. But so it sort of morphed into eugenics and then came to be brandished by Hitler to endorse some pretty grotesque things. But today I still see this sort of narrative of supremacy being wielded through survival of the fittest. And I do think that many people misunderstand it and think it means dominance or masculinity or dominating a single person or a race. And so I use basically the story of an emu war to describe survival of the fittest, and then link that to Hitler, and then describe all of the ways that we have misunderstood survival of the fittest, so that we can try to reframe it in our minds a little bit to understand that this is not about dominating each other. I think we need to move away from these narratives of dominance and toward narratives of collaboration, because many species and many of the theory of evolution has largely been built on collaboration. And I think in today's society we seem to have forgotten that really crucial part of what makes humans so special, the ability to collaborate and form communities.
I love the way that this story, there's so many beautiful stories in here, but I think that narrative about dominance, I think that really speaks to our relationship with nature so much. You know, we always think of ourselves as, I don't know, does anyone have a four-wheel drive here? There's no one. Okay, one person. Okay. I have noticed when I have been in a four-wheel drive and to explore parts of nature that, go somewhere, there is this other sort of attitude with that exploration of dominating nature. Yeah. So I think about this in your book.
Is that what you do?
Yes, the one person who... No, it's like, wow, we can see these incredible places and experience it, but there's this relationship humans have with nature that it's not about collaborating with nature, it's about...
We see it as having mastery over nature, rather than we are part of nature. We depend on nature. We do not exist without nature. We are entirely dependent on nature. We are not the masters of nature at all.
No, as the emu has showed us. You also, and you mentioned this just before, and I do think this is, with the wristwatch, I never knew this about it, but you connect the propaganda that is used today to suppress environmental progress with a wristwatch. Can you tell us more, Nat?
Yeah, so around World War One, before World War One, wristwatches were considered effeminate frippery. Men weren't allowed to wear them, or it wasn't socially acceptable for men to wear wristwatches. They were seen as very feminine. And that was a problem for watch manufacturers because they wanted to sell the most amount of watches. And so there was a watch manufacturer that reached out to this PR guru, and his name was Edward Bernays. And Edward Bernays was known as the godfather of PR. And Edward Bernays was, for reference, the nephew of Sigmund Freud. So it was a very psychologically based public relations institute that he ran. Anyway, so the watch manufacturer said to Edward Bernays, we need to sell more watches to men. We need to get them wearing them. How do we do that? So Edward Bernays had to think about it, and he thought, how do I associate watches with masculinity? And then he said, I know, soldiers, the paragon of masculinity. So then he started this campaign of misinformation where he started putting out all of these marketing campaigns that said men who don't wear wristwatches at war are dying more, and that's because they're spending too much time reaching into their pockets to get their pocket watches, and that's killing them.
Not the guns and bullets.
No,
Okay.
Very soon after that, the US military signed a contract to get every soldier wearing a wristwatch. And this is the beginnings of the modern propaganda campaign. And there were a few tactics that were employed that I talk about in my book, but basically it is you need to associate your product with something desirable. And that propaganda campaign has been used by the tobacco industry. It has also been used by the fossil fuel industry, and it has been used by NFL, American football. Yeah, and that was around...
Yeah, forestry.
Yes. And it is a very sophisticated, long-standing campaign that preys on people's fears that... and, you know, we see it today where fossil fuel organisations at the moment, they've branded themselves more as human rights organisations that are, you know, getting people out of poverty. And so it's a really interesting and really sophisticated form of propaganda that actually has its roots in wristwatches.
I love that. I did hear a chuckle when it was like, how do we get wristwatches more masculine? I will ask you about that chuckle later. It is interesting, and I think when we think about the misinformation that goes there, and I did want to ask you this because we were talking about this before. In this book, there are so many beautiful facts and gems of wisdom. How did you sift through all the information out there to get to those? Like, how was that discovery journey?
So, I mean, this book is... I mean, it's my whole heart and my whole brain. And I don't know if it's embarrassing to say this because it depends if you like. I tried so hard. I mean, I really tried hard with this. So this book it's got over 700 references in the book. It's deeply researched, and the fun part was, and sometimes, you know, research can be quite dense. So I was going through minutes from meetings between geologists. And I don't know if you've ever read the minutes of geology meetings. They're
fascinating.
It's quite boring. And so the fun part was, okay, how do I make this funny or interesting? How do I bring all of this to life? So I was a bit addicted to doing that. But the research, I've been working in this space for a long time. There's experts in the field that I can lean on and whose research I trust and know. I mean, David is one of them. So I would make sure that I was going after peer-reviewed research and getting people who were experts to fact-check and proof what I said, and constantly challenging myself. But I have been collecting research and stories and facts for a long time. So it was probably, it was a little bit easier for me to do because I knew what I was looking for. But the research, it is research intensive, and it actually, so the reference, if you just had a look at opened the book and saw the references, you'd think you were about to start reading a PhD, but it's not it's kooky, but yeah, it is
Yes.
very heavily
We started
researched.
with kooky.
yeah.
I know. Can we go back into the clitorises? No. Well, just on the research side, you mentioned that over 80% of medicines come from nature. Like, so much of our livelihoods depend on it. Can you talk to, why, like, ancient and modern medicines, it's in nature first before the lab?
Absolutely, and most of our medicines were, first used by Indigenous peoples, and even now the pharmaceutical industry, there are some pretty strong exploitation of both Indigenous communities and nature for the pharmaceutical industry. But that's a whole. But I actually wanted to talk to you about the Madagascan periwinkle. Has anybody ever heard of the Madagascan? Sorry. I'm very excited by this stuff. The Madagascan periwinkle, it's like this little pink or white flower that grows in Madagascar. And it had been used by Indigenous peoples for years, but today it's known by modern medicine as the cure to childhood cancer. And that is because the extracts from this flower are the cornerstone treatment for Hodgkin's lymphoma and leukemia. And so prior to the rediscovery of this flower, these two childhood cancers were death sentences for children. Today, the survival rate for children with these cancers sits at over 90% in developed countries, and that is because of one tiny little flower that grows in the red soils of Madagascar. And so it's to say that if we continue destroying nature the way we are, we might just see the cure to cancer become extinct, or these sort of the ancient wisdom of our trees and plants being lost. So it is not just for human use, but we sure have a big interest in protecting it.
Absolutely. I think about reading this book was such a joy. In the evenings around the dinner table, we have this, what's your new-hoo, boo-hoo, or woo-hoo? And it's like, what did you learn today, or your highlight? And it was always, I think my family did get a bit sick of like all the little gems that I could share from this book, which I'm so hoping that you do this too. In the book, you also, it's so much about nature, but it's so deeply human, and you describe the extraordinary lengths that ordinary people go to protect nature, to advocate for, and to band together and do something really extraordinary for the environment. Can you tell us some of those stories?
Yeah, I probably should preface this by saying sometimes I just spontaneously cry when I talk about my book, and it will probably happen because I'm very passionate about it, and also I had the privilege of just interviewing the most wonderful people, and even after writing the book, so many people have reached out to me just to share the things that they're doing to protect nature and protect communities. So it's just been this a really beautiful experience. But I mean, one of my favourite stories in the book was I interviewed a 12-year-old girl. She's a forest defender in Tasmania and a citizen scientist. She spends her days when she's not at school taking adults through the forest to teach them about it. And then she helps the Bob Brown Foundation collect data. And she made a promise to a Tasmanian masked owl that she was going to protect it. And so now it's her mission to protect the owl, and I think she'll succeed at that. I interviewed wildlife rescuers who, by the way, wildlife rescuers and carers, over 75% of them are women, and most of them are over the age of 45. I interviewed women who spent Christmas Eve dangling upside down inside a stormwater drain to rescue a tiny little lorikeet, carers who were on their feet for 23 hours straight during the Victorian bushfires. They were peeling burnt possum bodies off roofs and stitching them back together, and they do it for no money. I knew it was going to happen.
We'll talk about the bonobos again.
No.
No.
They are one of the largest and most under-recognised volunteer workforces in the world, predominantly women over 45. And they do the most extraordinary things. They convert their houses into wildlife sanctuaries. and they just get, no, I'm good. They just get no recognition. So I interviewed these incredible people that give everything. So even though the world, I mean, I don't know if you all agree, but the world kind of sucks right now, I am filled with so much hope and joy because there are so many of us. There are so many people. Should I read? Should I read
I think you should, yeah.
This one doesn't make me cry.
Because I think, I love that you do point out that this incredible leadership and this bravery can come from the most unlikely of places. And it is really inspiring to see because it gives you agency that you can be part of the solution. And I'd love you to read about the penguins.
Do you mind if I read an extract of the book? For context, this was in the year 2000 and a cargo ship had sank off the coast of South Africa. And oil had been spilled, and it was in an area that was between two islands, which was home to the largest colonies of vulnerable African penguins. And so this was risking the largest population of African penguins in the world. So I'll start from... News of the oil spill began to trickle through nearby communities. The future of Africa's only penguin species was in danger. 75,000 African penguins faced immediate threat from the spill. What happened next was one of the most remarkable wildlife rescue missions in history. It started with one phone call and then another. Then right across the world, phones started ringing. Messages chimed between communities, countries, and continents. Emails were sent, supplies were gathered, cars were fueled, flights were booked, cleanup crews were dispatched. Zoo and aquarium staff woke at all hours of the night, alerting one another. Brazil, Ireland, New Zealand, Australia, France, Germany, Poland, Singapore, Canada, Hungary, the Netherlands, the UK, and the US all heeded the call and all rallied their teams. Networks of volunteers mobilised, charities assembled. The South African Foundation for the Conservation of Coastal Birds led the charge. The Department of Environmental Affairs arrived. The International Fund for Animal Welfare arrived. WWF arrived. International Bird Rescue arrived. The Red Cross arrived. A call to arms had been made, and right across the globe, people roused from their beds and they came. They were readying to save the African penguin. And then came the volunteers. They descended upon South Africa. They came en masse from every corner of the planet. Cape Town was ground zero, and the world was coming to help. Mums and dads, grandmas and grandpas, children of all ages, students, locals, tourists, doctors, nurses, the young and the old, the experienced and inexperienced. They came alone, they came in groups, they came in sneakers, they came in designer clothes and in wetsuits and in business suits and in dresses. The fishermen showed up, the medics showed up, the media showed up, the chefs showed up, the school kids showed up. They arrived on foot and in cars and on bikes and in planes and on boats and in helicopters. They travelled through the night across all time zones. They brought food and they bought drinks. They bought spray bottles and toothbrushes, wash tubs and garden hoses. They came with towels and heat lamps, with syringes and needles and catheters and ointments and vitamins. They came with wheelbarrows and forklifts and pallets of frozen fish. They came with rubber gloves and tables and chairs and clipboards and two-way radios. They came and they kept coming. Local fishermen took to cleaner waters to catch fresh fish for the oiled penguins. The Red Cross bandaged and stitched fingers shredded from force-feeding penguins. The South African Air Force installed wiring, lighting and ventilation systems. Ferries, which usually shuttled tourists, carried boxes of oil-soaked penguins to safety. People in ski boats surfed breakers with boxes of birds under their arms. Locals set up hotlines for potential volunteers. In July, 6 people answered 28,346 phone calls from those wanting to help. They spoke with people as young as 6 and as old as 96. A 7-year-old girl donated the contents of her piggy bank to the penguins. Australians knitted sweaters for birds and shipped them across the ocean. This was the largest volunteer workforce ever assembled. And the volunteers kept coming every day for months and months. They kept coming. Some were experienced, but most had never handled birds. They fed penguins, they washed them with toothbrushes, they scrubbed oil off thrashing bodies, they swam penguins in makeshift pools, they cleaned pens and set up tents and worked through all hours of the day and night. 363 tonnes of fish were fed to the birds. 6,350 tonnes of beach sand were brought in for bird pens, and 7,500 litres of detergent were used to clean the birds. All in all, 45,000 people showed up, donating more than 500,000 hours of their time to save the penguins. And it worked. 40,000 African penguins were saved. 90% of oiled birds that were captured were rehabilitated and released back into the wild. The call for help was answered. The world had showed up for one little penguin. It happens, you know, these people, they're everywhere. These incredible, beautiful, kind people who show up, who give everything. All over the world, people are showing up for wild species and environments. On the front lines of the environmental crisis, a hidden army marches, quietly gathering in every corner of the planet. They are a force that spans continents, an unstoppable movement of ordinary individuals doing extraordinary things.
I look out into this crowd and I can see everyone can be part of that volunteer crowd, everyone. You've called this book a love letter to nature, but it's also a tragedy and a warning. What do you want readers to take away from this book?
I wanted people to feel and to have the facts, to be equipped with all of the information and the knowledge. But I think that, most of all, I think we need to fall in love. I think if you fall in love with something, you fight to protect it. And so that's what I wanted people to take away, to fall in love with nature, to perhaps see the world differently. My final chapter is a bit of an ode to bird watchers, because I think, they're really fun to write about, the quirks, but I think it's a great inspiration for the world, this willingness to simply look up and see the world around you, to pay attention to the world around you, to see that one bird is a prism into the rest of the world, that an ecosystem, that relies on an ecosystem around it. And so I guess what I want people to take away is both to fall in love and to look up. But I do believe that change is community-led. It's grassroots. It's on the ground. It's people like the penguin people that just show up. It is kindness in communities. It is small steps. It is a farmer rescuing a possum on his property. It is someone picking up rubbish on the street when they don't have to. It is smiling at your neighbour. It is chatting to your neighbour and deciding that you want to install, a speed hump to protect children on the street or local wildlife. It always starts small, and so I wanted people to read this book and see that actually your role is really powerful, and it doesn't matter your age, your background, your financial situation, you can always do something. So I hope people read the book and realise that the heaviness and the gravity of the time that we are living in, and how important this is. But I also hope that people feel inspired and empowered to take this forward.
Absolutely. And on that note, we can actually open to the floor for questions as well. So if you have some questions for Nat, if there are some nodding heads, if someone's already read the book, but it would be great to open the floor up, because I think that's what's the beautiful thing about this book, is that you do feel like you can be part of this. You can make that pact to an owl, and you can take small steps and also advocate for that bigger change with your community. So do we have any questions from the floor? Oh, yes. Oh.
How do you keep up hope in the Trump era when so much of nature is being destroyed?
Well, what Trump has shown us is that one person can make a difference. I never fully believed it, but now I do. we have so much. I mean, I really struggled writing. So I wrote the epilogue of my book. I wrote my whole book, and then they wanted me to write an epilogue which ties everything up and then gives people a way forward. And right as I was starting it, Trump got elected, and I was not filled with hope. So it was really challenging. I think that I think this has forced us to look at the realities of the world. Trump is a symptom of a world that we have created that is built on systems that are harming nature and harming communities. And we have been moving in this direction for quite some time. Now that is all in the open. It is very much an open wound for us to see, and I hope that we make decisions or we act in a way that changes that. So I think in a way it's a great reveal. But I have hope because though there is a lot of attention and focus given on this sort of concentration of power and really grotesque forms of power, for the most part, I walk down the street and the people that I talk to day to day, the people that I interviewed for the book and the people reaching out to me, most people are good people. They care about their communities, they care about their children, they care about their children's future. They might have different opinions, they might, secretly yell at each other on social media, but most people are good, kind people, and I'm meeting them all the time. And so I see these, I think powerful movements are starting to grow. I think communities are starting to realise that these systems don't work. The fact that we are now even hearing the words oligarchy mentioned in mainstream and there's this pushback against billionaires, I think I hope we are moving to a point where we can really start challenging these underlying systems. And so maybe Trump will show us just how broken the systems, our political, our economic systems are, so that we have the case to fix them. But a lot of the time I personally get my hope from laughing, being with my family, watching birds, looking up, looking outside, seeing that you can go online and the world is terrible, but you walk out and you talk to somebody at the coffee shop or your cafe and the world's okay. They're nice people, and I'll just keep trying really hard to do everything I can to make the world a little bit better and hope that others do the same.
You definitely are, Nat. We have a question up here, but I'll go to there. I was going to talk politically because conservatives can be for nature too.
I think my question might tie into that well. I have two, but I'll ask you the other one later. I think from my side, have you had any backlash from people in terms of communicating these stories in a way that's, I suppose, side of science, but also through that sort of non-conventional form? You mentioned before that it was not necessarily the sexiest when you were pitching it as a non-fiction, and just how that reception has been since you've pushed forward and released the book.
That's a really good question. So the process for me getting this book published and all of it has been the most idyllic. I wouldn't even want to tell too many people. I have had the most idyllic experience with it. The support and reception has been wonderful. It has honestly been beyond my wildest dreams. It's getting made into a TV series. So it's... I'm gonna cry. So, yeah. There was, actually, there's been two bits of backlash, and they were from really unexpected things. One was not even related to my book. It was on social media. I posted a video where I was a little bit condescending because I'm getting really frustrated with the government on these nature laws. And I just said, just because you don't understand the science doesn't mean it's not real. It just means that you're personally confused. And
that was polite. That was really quite kind of you.
And I got a lot, like thousands of comments of people. It's a lot of the same commentary, but somebody called me like a stupid C-U-N-T, but they misspelt stupid. So that was fun. So there was that. which wasn't super related to my book, but a little bit. But the most controversial thing about my book was that there is a part about how Barnaby Joyce wanted to give herpes to freshwater fish. And this was when it was a carp eradication program, and basically it was just a little snippet of a story that I put in my book to ask the broader question: if the Deputy Prime Minister can't give herpes to a freshwater fish, what hope do we have for mobilising effective political action for nature? Anyway, I didn't realise just how big the carp herpes debate was. People it is full on. They were really coming after me with all of their opinions. I wasn't advocating one way or the other. I was just stating what happened. But then I had some scientists reach out, and they're really in favour of carp herpes, and they wanted to talk to me. And they've told me they've been cancelled a few times because they advocate for herpes. And so it ended up actually being one of the greatest experiences, because not only have I learned even more about carp herpes, but I've met these really people that are passionate, and it doesn't matter what their passion, like what side they're passionate about. They're passionate about carp herpes, and so I love that.
Did you have a second question? Oh, that was, yeah.
Thank you. I love it. I'm a scientist, and I love it that you share science through storytelling. One of the areas you mentioned about the tobacco companies, and we are working in Western Sydney, getting youth activists up in schools to actually take on the tobacco company. How can we? What can you share with us for us to send back these messages to young people through storytelling, and how they can take on the tobacco company, especially against e-cigarettes and vaping? And that's what we are fighting with.
Yeah, it's really. Thank you for your work as well. The tobacco industry and the fossil fuel industry, they are just huge, and the misinformation, the propaganda that they are able to spread it's quite scary. I don't know if I have all the answers. There is a chapter in my book about propaganda. I think understanding how propaganda works and some of the tactics that these companies use can be helpful. And because there are, the fact that, we started, environmentalists became tree huggers, and then tree huggers became a negative word, and then they started associating environmentalism with this sort of youthful idealism, and then with people who, weren't connected to reality and have no understanding of the economy. And so it was sort of seen as they've done a really good job of diminishing anybody who speaks up for the environment or for science. So I think at a first level is understanding the tactics that these tobacco companies have been using. But second, looking at, I think, speaking with other youth, and I don't know, the thing is, I don't actually know the answer, because I'm still trying to figure it out and experiment myself. It's really hard. I don't know what works. I keep trying. We all keep trying. Trying to. You've got tactics like California's governor, Gavin Newsom. His approach to combating misinformation or combating Trump is to essentially act like him. And I don't know if you've seen him on social media. He writes the funny, oh my God. It's terrible for society to be, but like a race to the bottom. But his posts on social media sound exactly like Trump, and he's hilarious. He calls himself the most attractive governor in capital letters and all. So is it cop? I don't know. Does anybody know? I'm not sure. Can we connect these kids in with kids who have campaigned against fossil fuel companies? And yeah, so, but I'll have more of a think, or if you figure it out, let me know.
Thank you, Natalie, for a beautiful book and a beautiful presentation. I love the fact that the key ethos is helping people fall in love with nature. It really captures my heart. As a researcher, one of the things I've been researching is people's level of planetary empathy. So how empathic are they with the planet and with nature? And we discovered that, unsurprisingly, older educated women have much higher levels of planetary empathy, but that empathy drives not just the way they feel, but the way they act, their pro-environmental behaviours. And it seems like the other thing we discovered is the more time people spend in nature, the more engaged they are with fighting for nature. And yet, I read recently that in developed countries, the average child spends less than 5 minutes a day in nature.
Yeah.
So it comes back to your comment. How do we get children and young people to love nature? Because they are going to be our future warriors. They are our future, and that they're inheriting the planet. What can we do for young people and children?
Yeah, thank you. I wrote an article about that as well, about screen time and taking away from nature. There's a couple. One is that the really interesting movement of forest schools across Australia. So we could do, as parents or guardians or adults, we could do more advocacy for the notion of forest schools across Australia. Two is I'm a big fan of citizen science. If kids have phones, can they use them to embark in citizen science? It's or bird watching. These are fun. There's a little bit of competition in them, but most of all, it is about getting outside and finding things and exploring. And so I would put quite a lot of faith in citizen science. There's the screen thing. We also this needs to be a government, because at the moment the technology is designed to be as addictive as possible. And I personally, this is going into a whole other topic, I don't think a social media ban, we know it's not going to cut it. We need to be reining in these tech companies quite a lot. But I think it is a simple advocacy of forest schools and more nature-based curriculum, going outside more, taking your kids camping more if you have the means, citizen science and citizen science programs. There's so many great ones in Australia, including kids that were published in a journal for playing a role in the discovery of these insect species. And so citizen science can be hugely rewarding. Bird watching, I don't know if you can do this as a parent, but I used to love being outdoors, but my sister didn't so much, and my parents would just sort of kick her out and lock the door. And you run free.
Yeah. I mean, it was a wild time back then, yeah.
I don't know if that's an option.
No, I try and get them outside as much as possible, and there's so many beautiful pockets of nature around here. We're surrounded by it. You don't have to go far. But did you have a question as well? I think we have time for maybe two more, and then.
Maybe related to that question, and I haven't read your book, but I intend to now. So I haven't read your bio, but I was wondering what sparked this purpose in you. Was it from childhood, or how did you become a nature warrior?
I mean, as a child, I loved nature. I was always outdoors, always dirty. My parents used to take us camping. My parents didn't have, when I was really young, my parents didn't have much money. But we had this caravan. We used to go camping every weekend. And on the weekends that we didn't go camping, my dad would pitch a tent in our backyard, and my sister and me and Dad would pretend we were in a forest, and there was all these predators outside, and it was really fun. But then we found out later that Dad actually did that to give Mum a break from us. But I had a childhood spent. I was always outdoors. My childhood was at the library, books and nature. That's all it was. So it's a little bit. I was wired a little bit wired that way, that you care about nature, you care about the people that the people and the things that you share the world with. But I actually sort of got into it almost accidentally. I was studying to be a journalist, and I wanted to report on environmental and human rights abuses. And then I was going to go on. I started doing my master's in international relations. But while I was doing my master's, I came up with this idea. I wanted to build a mobile game app where that would allow kids to become virtual conservationists, and that ultimately I could see how kids were becoming really obsessed with these apps like Angry Birds, and I thought they had no social or educational value. So it was essentially, I ended up building this app, this was 15 years ago, so apps were really hard to build back then, but kids could rescue wildlife, build their own habitat, to compete in educational pop quizzes, learning about wildlife, but each animal in the app represented a real life charity, so the scenarios in the app reflected real life scenarios, and then they could support charities. And so it started out as me just doing this passion project because I was frustrated with the lack of engagement in wildlife and environmental issues. I was frustrated with all of these games that didn't have anything educational or environmentally good in them. But the app, it became all-consuming, and kids really liked it, and their parents liked it, and then we started doing education programs for schools, and then by that stage, I was on such a mission. Like I sold my car and put my life savings into building this app, and then I started trying to sell my sister's things on eBay, and I did garage sales to raise money from garage sales, and then I googled who are very rich people in Australia, and then I emailed the rich people to try and get their money, and they didn't give me any money, but by the time I had built this app, I was all in. Like I was heavily embedded in the non-profit sector. Knew that I thought this was the single biggest issue. We have nothing without the environment. It is linked to human rights, community rights, climate change. It is everything. And I was like, so this is what I should, whatever skills I have, which there weren't many then. I wanted to direct towards that. So yeah, I was on a new path.
I know. I think there's a lot of moments to cry and clap throughout this hour with us. I think there was one question from the back, which will be our final. Oh, Nature's Last Dance, last question.
Yeah, it's actually about the title you chose. I was just wondering if you were tempted at any stage to call it or True Nature Last Dance or Nature Our Last Dance. And I'm sure you understand what I mean by that. It's just we still put nature out there as something which is exterior.
Yeah.
And I suspect you probably had this thought in some ways, and we can see them through your explanations, through your books. So yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I did. I played it. So it's Nature's Last Dance, and then it's Tales of Wonder in an Age of Extinction. So it's a bittersweet title, and it was meant to be bittersweet, and it was meant to capture the full breadth of our experience with nature, which is one of tragedy and joy and humour and quirkiness and wildness, and it's everything. And so the title was meant to capture that. But I had so many different iterations of the title and who I was centering in the title. Was I centering nature in the title or humans in the title? And then you have to talk with your publisher, and you're thinking, okay, if you put this title, then there's a bunch of people that automatically won't read it because it has the word nature in it, and so it was a process, and but it was one of those things that I was so close to it by the end that I had no idea. I ended up saying, okay, publishers, you do what you want with it, and they wanted to keep it, and so we did. And I don't know, if I wrote it again, I'd probably go with a different title, but I'm not sure.
Natalie is going to be around, so I do hope that everyone here, if you haven't already got the book, please do grab it. It's also very close to Christmas, and Natalie will be here to sign it. But Natalie, as well as reading this book, loving nature, is there something that this beautiful collective of community can also get involved and do and be empowered to help us protect and love nature more?
I mean, there's quite a few things. I have a whole list of actions in my book, actually, of things that people can do at a systems level. I'm leaning more towards, I think we need to find ways to cross political divides and reach other people that think differently. I think we just need to learn to connect and talk better with people that think differently to us. I think our societies are fracturing, and these people in the comment section that were yelling at me, calling me stupid and misspelling stupid, I don't really like them, but I feel like maybe I need to find better ways to reach these people who are ultimately being harmed by misinformation and being targeted by misinformation. And so maybe even though we're all empathetic people, maybe we can be a little bit more empathetic or start a revolution. I don't know which way. I actually don't know which way. We might have to it might have to be a revolution.
I think so. Please join me in thanking Natalie.